Hi guys, Cassie here, and today I wanted to go over this little unusual game from many years ago. It came out back in 2013, but I think that Among Us has shown everyone that, sometimes games that didn't used to be popular can kind of reemerge. So I want to show off games that I think should reemerge, especially with the Steam sales coming up. It can kind of be good to know, like, all right, what's old but interesting, and I think this one fits the bill. So to start off with, the name of this game, I'm going to absolutely butcher, is Rymdkapsel, and here's how you actually say that.
Rymdkapsel.
So that wasn't too far off. Basically, apparently it means in Swedish space capsule, which I feel like is a pretty accurate name for this game. Basically, the whole idea is that you start off with these two little bonums, and then you set them off to go build this space station, and the whole point is to keep the space station safe, sustainable, and get to these monoliths, which are these like areas that I'm trying to travel to right now in the image, which basically you have to research those. They give you upgrades, and then if you research all four of them, then you win the game. So in the battle to win this game, you're going to have these enemies that come flying at you, so you kind of have to move quickly because every level gets more and more challenging. As you go along, you get more and more enemies that come and attack you, so you kind of have to get your butt in gear. And I played this quite a bit, so I think I've figured out a pretty good strategy. I'm going to show it off a little bit later, but essentially each one of these different building types do different things. So to start off with, you need to have the pink buildings, which are called the extractors, and that's the only resource that you have to actually physically get your little bonums to reach and set up stations there, because if you run out of that resource, basically every building uses that resource, so you do end up needing to get yourself to each one of those extraction points. That is like a key aspect of it. So as you can see, there's a number of them. You don't have to get to all of them at once, just know that you will run out of that pink material eventually, so you have to keep half an eye on it. The blue material, which is the reactor, sometimes you can put an engineer on that to kind of help it, I guess, go faster, but it's a resource where you only want to make that building again if you need your bonums to have that resource closer to them. Otherwise, having just one of that building is usually fine. Same thing with the gardens and the food areas. Basically, those, you don't need too many of those. I completed this entire playthrough with just one of each, and I was fine, but you do have to assign people to do the food service so that they can take the sludge from the gardens and turn it into food. And then the aspect that you kind of have to work on the most is probably the ratio of quarters to weapon stations, because every round, and your goal is to get through, one of your goals anyway, is to get through 28 rounds of enemies attacking you. Every round, you're going to want your little bonums to be going into the weapons, as I'm showing with my mouse going crazy there. You're going to want your little bonums to be able to be in there and be protected and be able to actually shoot at the enemies. If you have too many bonums and not enough weapon stations, they will die. They will definitely die of just being shot up by the enemies. And sometimes you can have a whole bunch of weapon stations and your guys will still die because they just get overwhelmed by the enemies. Like, as the enemies keep going, it gets harder and harder. Something that I like about this game is that every piece is like a Tetris piece. So I certainly didn't make mine the most aesthetically pleasing place ever, but you can make a really aesthetically pleasing area of this game, like I guess control a space capsule. You can make an aesthetically pleasing space capsule, and it's fun. It's challenging. There's harder modes to this game. I was playing this on normal, but it's one of those games that's just simple but kind of interesting. So if you're looking for something new to try out, I would say this can be a good way to kill some time. So if you heard all of that and you're going, I think I really will get this game, you can go ahead and stop there. Right now I'm kind of show off my particular end game of this match that I did, and I'm going to talk about some of the tips and tricks that I used in order to be able to win my particular game. So if you don't want to hear any of that, go ahead and stop and play the game. And if you do want to hear some of those tips and tricks so that hopefully you jump in this game and you win it on the first time around, then go ahead and stay. So the first thing, the most important thing that I found, or that I learned in this particular playthrough, is that you're going to want to build your weapon stations before you build any quarters. So the quarters basically will add 2 new guys, but they do need food to be brought to them in order for them to generate. But before you go ahead and do that, if you build those guys without having the weapon stations, basically when the enemies come swarming, they're going to get killed like immediately. If they're not protected by a weapon station, if they can't fight back, they die. So you basically waste a turn generating those guys and then they die right away. So what I would say is always build your weapon stations before you build your quarters. And I would certainly say that in terms of how you distribute your guys in your later game, you're going to want to focus less on construction and more on food production. I was, by the end game, usually keeping about 2 or 3 people on food production so that if I happen to lose any guys during the course of the waves, that I could bring those guys back before the next wave and be better off. I would also say by the time I was reaching the end game, I was keeping at least 2 people on research. You can put up to 3 people on one monolith at a time, but I found usually 2 was a good sweet spot because the researchers are going to be the ones that take the longest to get back to the weapon station. And the weapon station can only take 2 people at a time. So that's what I found worked for me. But you can do what you want to do. And I also found that the red line, it will start beeping by the time it gets to around the research area. But by the time the red line had gotten like 75% of the way, by the time it had gotten to research, I would already be kicking my people into weapons. By the time it got to weapons, not research. By the time it got to weapons, it signaled to me to put people in weapons because it takes the guys time to go from their extended areas and reach the weapons protection. So that's just something to keep in mind. And yeah, so I was happy on my second time around. I was actually able to beat the game, and it does have harder levels. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and toodles for now.